Congressman Collins, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you.
Thanks so much. It's good to be with you, Brad.
Congressman, my first question is really just a general one, and I guess we could probably spend the entire show answering it, but just try to give us a feel from your perspective in D.C. When is our country going to start to feel normal again? A lot of viewers saw you in the spotlight during the impeachment hearings, and ever since then it feels like this nation is just upside down.
It is, Brad, and I think it's really concerning. You know, just as a citizen, but as a father, as someone who's still in the military, someone and especially being in politics up here on Capitol Hill, everything seems to be up in the air. Someone once told me that in life you can only keep so many balls up in the air. You're juggling life all the time, but when all the balls are up in the air, it's a state of sort of uncertainty that nobody knows which is going to land first. And what we've seen over the last 18 months, and you brought up impeachment, you brought up the investigations, I think that led right into a very disconcerting part of a polarization of America. Then you went right into the virus, in which kept everybody at home, and that pent-up frustration and that pent-up anger of not being able to get out and not being able to get going. And once we did get out, we had frankly the murder of Mr. Floyd up in Minneapolis. We had the situation with Mr. Aubrey in Brunswick, and now people are very frustrated and they're getting out. And unfortunately, some of that civil discourse is spilled over into anarchy and to just baseless criminal activity. So we are at a difficult time, but we can come through this, and I'm a firm believer that cooler heads and common sense can prevail.
What's the timetable for that stuff to prevail, though? We saw Georgia approve a hate crimes law just this week. The Senate in your neck of the woods tried to, but failed on its try yesterday. When do you think that we'll start to see some of these measures that lawmakers are taking kick in so that there is more calm?
Well, again, I think that those are helpful items, and I think we need to get police reform done. And there's things that actually can work. As a son of a Georgia State trooper, and I've been around the policing world all my life, and there are things that need to happen. We need to provide, more transparency and accountability for our police department so that the bad police officers can be gotten rid of quicker. They can be moved on, can enforce and reinforce the training of the good officers so that communities can have faith. But I want to go back to something really what you sort of talked about. When will this end? I think it's beyond really laws. Laws are only as good as the people who actually will look at those laws and say, I will abide by them. What we're missing right now is trust. I pastored for a long time in counseling situations. What I told many times when people who are having disagreements, couples or others, I would tell them the very thing that you need is the very thing that's broken. And our country right now needs trust in each other. We need to renew that trust, that we can disagree civilly, that we can still have passionate political arguments, but at the end of the day realize that we're all still Americans, we're all still Georgians, and that at the end of the day can come together and say what is the best solution. But right now, with the heightened fears and heightened anxieties, it's going to take us a little time. But I believe with good common sense conversation, with having dialogue back and forth, holding each other accountable in those ways, then I think we can move forward.
Congressman Collins, please talk about the situation in Atlanta with the shooting of Rashard Brooks. The district attorney in Fulton County has charged one of the officers with murder. You do not think that is the right move. What would you say, especially to the folks who've seen that video and say, how could it not be? We see the officer shoot the guy, shoot the man dead.
Well, in fact, the video is actually the reason why I'm so concerned about this. This is not the killing of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis. This is not an officer who has a bound suspect with his knee on his neck for over 8.5 minutes. This is a situation that evolved over a 45-minute time period, and when it became obvious that an arrest was being made, Mr. Brooks fought back. There was a confrontation. Those are the things that need to be investigated. What I have a problem with is Paul Howard as DA, who's in the middle of a runoff re-election, and is going at it from a perspective of having no investigation done, not taking this to a grand jury, and just deciding on his own that we're going to make charges before the investigation is done. We just talked about a moment ago, how do we heal in our country? We've got to have healing on both sides. Our police officers who protect us and do the things that they're supposed to do should be given the same due process and understanding from the district attorney's office as anybody else does. And if we don't have that, if the prosecutorial actions of a DA in Fulton County become political, then we are losing the rule of law. And that has to come back in. So I'm encouraging him to do the right thing, step aside in this case, let the Attorney General appoint someone, or that there'll be more pressure put on him by state officials and others.
What would you say to folks who are reluctant to go to Atlanta right now? I have some folks here in Augusta who've said there's no way they'd go to the Capitol right now considering the climate. I saw something last night where there was a person standing at the spot where Rashard Brooks was killed, and he said the police are not welcome here anymore. Who's in charge there?
That's a great question. I mean, that's a question for Mayor Bottoms. Where is she in this situation? Where is the police chief? I mean, are we allowing a sort of occupation zone, if you would? I understand last night there was possibly some movement in that to clear that out, and the police were possibly involved in that, and that's still developing. But again, and if the mayor won't handle it, the governor I know could handle it, but this is not mayor. We cannot have an autonomous zone anywhere in this country that says simply we're going to take over and go out without a rule of law and have mob rule. And right now, I would say people going to Atlanta, I've gone back and forth there. We need to take steps out, but also there is these areas of caution that I think the police are going to have to step up and take responsibility to get it fixed. But it is, again, goes back to that trust issue, and people believe that when you have a neighborhood that is upset, you have police who are fearful to do their job because they don't believe they'll be backed up in any situation. It presents a really troublesome picture.
As the son of a trooper, do you think better training is going to be a huge step to fix all of this if those officers go out and do their jobs with a new mindset thanks to different training?
I think training never hurts. It's almost like education. Education is one of the greatest equalizers we have for anyone going out and learning. And look, the thing also we have to understand here is I'll even say 99.9% of all the officers do it right. We're always discussing the ones who do it wrong, and rightfully so. Just like we would do a bad politician, a bad news reporter, or anybody else. We always end up having to discuss what happens in the exceptions. But the rule is that most of these men and women show up every day and do their job professionally. They do it in very tough situations. But there also has to be a key component here. There has to be an understanding of society that the police are there to keep civil order, and the community is there to also abide by that civil order in a way that can hopefully crack down on these confrontations and again restore a sense of peace in our communities instead of this disruption. I think we've experienced 6 months of extreme disruption, and we're going to have to come back to that. But training is always a good thing. And accountability. One of the things we've seen in Washington, D.C. is to actually hold accountable, especially in some of the bigger cities where you have rules and bylaws in the unions that keep people from being fired. Bad officers need to be fired. They need to be held criminally liable when they have done criminal acts. But we cannot just simply allow it to be non-transparent where they can go and continue to do what they've been doing.
Congressman Doug Collins from Georgia's 9th Congressional District up around Gainesville, his hometown, is our special guest today on the Means Report. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk about the state of our country, including what should happen to people who don't uphold that civility, if you will, that Congressman Collins talked about, people who destroy monuments, who burn our flag. The president says they should go to jail. What does he think? And what happens from here as Election Day gets closer on the Means Report? Welcome back to the Means Report. We appreciate you staying with us as we continue our conversation with Congressman Doug Collins from the 9th Congressional District of the great state of Georgia. Congressman Collins, I want to ask you about something the president mentioned this past week when it comes to punishments for people who deface monuments, who burn the American flag. He says they should go to jail. What do you think?
Well, anyone that destroys public property is involved in a criminal act. This is not a part of civil disobedience in writing. What we're seeing is a move to the writing phase or the criminal aspect of this. And again, if we're simply trying to cancel culture, up here in Washington, D.C., we've actually tried to see them destroy the Lincoln Emancipation Monument, which was a tribute to the freedom of the slaves and breaking the bondage of slavery. We've seen monuments across the country of George Washington and others, and then also with other leaders in the Confederacy and others that are being taken down. The question is you can't simply just take down monuments to solve a problem that we're having here. And those need to be punished so that we can actually have civil discourse and dialogue on how we deal with our history and our past so that we can become better.
Do you think that Stone Mountain is going to be there in 10 years, the monument to leaders of the Confederacy?
I think it probably will be, but it's also as a learning point and a touchstone for a nation that was divided by hatred and race, and should never. We look forward to the day as we move forward as a peaceful people together. Look forward to where we came in our history and where we are now in a society that I learned as a child in church that said red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. Those are the kind of things and the values that we need to continue. We learn from the past and we move forward to a better one.
Amen. You know, I want to ask you, just as we sort of put a bow on the part of our conversation about the protests and the unrest, don't you think really in your heart of hearts that we're not going to have any real peace in this country until after the election, no matter who wins? Because it seems like everyone's just waiting for that.
Yeah, you've touched on it perfectly there. That is exactly what's happened, because I've dealt with it for 18 months up here, and really almost coming up on 2 years, because it was in November of 18 that unfortunately they decided that this was going to be about the 2020 election in Congress. It was not going to be about legislating. It was not going to be about governing. It was going to be about political statements against this administration. And so we have just dealt with that now on and off, and continually more on than off. So I think November 3rd will be a very deciding day for our country, and hopefully we can be able to have that election and move forward as we go forward. I look forward to the president being reelected, and getting back to the business of running the country.
Congressman Collins, why are you running for Senate? You know, people back here in Georgia have seen you climb the ladder in Congress, and you're now the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Why turn from that and take this huge chance?
Well, it's not a chance when you're actually fighting for the people of Georgia. Georgia's a changing state. There's a lot of things going on. We have proven over the past, I've only been up here 7.5 years in this role, and yes, we did move forward because we actually took our job seriously. We actually passed legislation such as the First Step Act, criminal justice reform, the very thing we're talking about right now, the president talks about. We've talked about intellectual property. We've talked about mental health issues, and those are the kind of things that in the state of Georgia they need a voice, and we wanted to provide a voice for actual getting things done, but having a conservative perspective. As our state grows and changes, a voice for conservatism, one who can actually voice on how we can move forward, is one that we need and actually get things done. Georgia is the 10th, but rapidly becoming the 9th and even possibly the 8th largest state. And we need our agricultural economy, our high-tech industries, and others to be well represented, not only in the House, but in the Senate as well. And we're offering the people of Georgia a choice in that.
Do you think the Democrats are going to keep the House? Because if they did, you're not going to get to be chair of the Judiciary Committee, a powerful committee. If the GOP takes it over, you would get that post, we would assume. Do you see that that's just not possible, and think to yourself, you know what, why not make a run at the Senate because I'm just stuck as the ranking member on Judiciary?
No, I've been privileged and blessed to be ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, and then had, when I started the Senate run, had to step down and from that actual position. This is not about, my, personal agenda. I've been very blessed to have a great career so far, just in the short time I've been here, but it's not a lifelong thing. And when I see what's happening in our state, and I see the election coming up in November, and I see the fact that I believe truly that Governor Kemp had every right to appoint the appointed Senator Leffler, but the people of Georgia need to make the decision on who's going to finish those last 2 years. And when you look at what's going on, I believe I'm the only one that can actually keep the seat as a Republican seat. I do not believe that Senator Leffler could keep that seat. So when we look at it from a bigger perspective, it's about keeping control of the Senate and also continuing to be a voice for Georgia in a very forceful way. Someone that has not had to learn now to how to do things, but has actually shown that we can do things.
Did you ever ask Governor Kemp, why'd you do me like that? And if so, what did he say when he picked Leffler over you?
Well, we only had a conversation after he already had picked her, and we did a lot of discussion on the whys. I think it was a pick that was made from some political calculations on what people in the suburbs would like to vote for and people who didn't vote for the president would like to vote for. And from my perspective, the way you engage voters is you actually have conversations with them. You talk about the situations in our suburbs and the mental health issues and our opioid issues and the things that are affecting our families. You go out into our other communities and minority communities and others who have been affected by criminal justice and are in a cycle of being trapped in poverty and not having opportunities. You go to our agricultural communities and you expand that base. Governor Kemp made his pick. He'll always have to decide how he wants to handle that pick. But I do believe that the reception that we've seen all over Georgia has been very positive to us, because they know that we fight for them, that we know that we have provided a national voice, not just a state voice for them in Washington, D.C., and we're going to continue to do that in the Senate.
I was watching a gathering of lawmakers and some of President Trump's leaders. I think it was right after impeachment was officially over and y'all were at the White House, and he referenced you and Kelly Leffler and said something to the effect of he was still trying to figure out what to do with both of y'all, but that he had some ideas. Has the president approached you and said, hey, Congressman Collins, do this or don't do that, or I might be able to place you here?
We're not looking for anything else. We made that very clear when we were humbly talked about for the Director of National Intelligence. And look, the president's been a very good friend of mine. He is continuing to be. We talk, we have a lot of communication with the White House on what we're doing in the agenda of getting his agenda pushed. This is about an election, what will solve this and which win. And I think it's very obvious that he's been very good to us, and he's also staying out of this race as he said he would. And I think it's very telling that he's doing that out of respect for us and our friendship and what we have done for him. And look, I think the biggest thing is let's go to what the people of Georgia need to hear. They need to hear two candidates who are going to present their ideas, but at the same point, you're going to also see myself, who actually has accomplished things in Washington, D.C., and not just simply, would be having to work toward those ideals and goals.
As we record this edition of the Means Report, we're seeing a spike in coronavirus cases across the country. I kind of felt like we were leaving the pandemic, at least part one of it, behind us. Do you think a second wave is coming, and is this nation ready for it?
I'm not sure it's a second wave. I think you're going to see more people, test positive as we get out and go more. Again, the issue that we're seeing here in Georgia is there may be more positives, but we're seeing for highs in different areas. We're not seeing the spike. We're seeing that in some places, and that's just something that we can continue to work on until there's a vaccine, until this becomes, the more of a norm and people continue to learn how to get back out and how to protect themselves. We're going to still see this, but I'm confident that right now it's also being, it's interesting to me is they only using percentages of increases in many of these states and not the actual number. I saw some numbers in which they, the numbers had increased over 50 or 100 people, but yet in a state of, several million, those are smaller numbers. But it looks a lot bigger when you say there's been a 50% increase or a 30% increase as you go forward. And we're seeing that across, the country. And, look, I think it's going to go up and down until we can actually get that vaccine and get a better handle on it like we do with other viruses.
Yeah, I think so too. Do you think the state of Georgia would be willing to shut down again? It seems like people would be really reluctant to do that.
I would hope not. I mean, I don't see the reason. I've traveled the state for the past few weeks, and it is amazing that, you go to some parts of the state that were not really affected by the virus at all, and it seems like nothing was ever, changed. And then, of course, you go to some of our cities, Augusta-Aiken, Atlanta, you're seeing a little more of caution as you go along. I think you're going to see as numbers come back out that people are wanting to get out. I was just up in the northeast Georgia mountains, a city called Helen, which is a lot of tourist destinations. I didn't realize it was the third most popular tourist destination in the state of Georgia, and their businesses up there are saying they're seeing 30 and 40% increases in people getting out. And that if it continues like this through the rest of the year, they will actually be ahead of last year, even with 2 months of the virus shutdown. So people are ready to get out. They're ready to get back to normal as best as normal can be. And that's what I would hope to see in the rest of the state.
Yeah, I had a friend who took his son to a golf tournament up in your neck of the woods at a Shasta near Gainesville, and he said people were out and about and seemed to be having a good time and being responsible. What about college? What about high school? What are you doing with your children, and should we all try to send our kids back in the fall?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do with mine is I got two at the University of Georgia that I'm trying to convince them to understand that college is a 4-year plan, not further. And get them out of college, but I'm ready to get them back in. I mean, as a dad, that's a simple plea from a dad's heart. But, schools need to come back in. We need to make arrangements for it. It may mean that they get their meals in the room. There may be other issues that they have to deal with. But society needs to try and attempt to get back to normal. And school is a very, very big function of that, not just because, my wife just retired after 30 and a half years of teaching. She retired in the pandemic. It was very hard for her because she loved her kids and didn't get to see them as she normally would. But you lose a year, you lose a half a year. And some of these young minds in K through, 12 in particular, but especially K through 5, you're doing, I think, very damaging results to the educational progress of some of these young boys and girls. And we need to make sure that we're trying to do our best to get them back into a classroom where they can grow and respond not only socially, but also in their studies as well. You'll probably see some blended coming up with those willing to come and then those who are still doing online. but I was looking forward to the colleges and universities all getting back, using precautions that they need to during this time, but getting back into class.
So that means football too, right?
I hope so. I'm a sports fan. I like to watch all kinds, and UFC and Korean baseball has been great. But I'm ready for the SEC. I'm ready for the Dogs and the others to start playing again. And I jokingly say I get this question a lot recently, and they said, "What do you think about football coming back?" And I said, "Well, they probably could lock 90-something thousand fans out of Sanford Stadium, but I'm not sure they're going to take 90,000 people out of Athens on a game day." So I'm hopefully it'll come back.
Well, I hope so too. Congressman Doug Collins, you've been so generous with your time. I know you're slammed right now, and we sure do appreciate you taking a few moments to be with us.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and it's been a great questions, great time to be with you.
Thank you so much. All the best to you, Congressman. We appreciate your service.